Mr. Bing jumped into bed thinking about how well rested he's gonna be tomorrow morning. You know, hotel beds, they've got a certain magic about them. They make you fall asleep, they make you stay asleep, or maybe it's like the blackout curtains that do that. Either way, he's very excited to have the much needed deep sleep, and it's Sunday night. So he's like a tiny bit concerned, a tiny bit worried that all of these other hotel guests, all of these neighbors around him, they're gonna be up loud and rowdy just partying through the weekend. He's a very light sleeper, so yes, he had some concern. And maybe, just maybe, he jinxed it. In a daze, Mr. Bing wakes up from a strange noise. It sounded kind of like a groan. A groan. He turns to look at the time on his phone, and the light is so bright he's like squinting his eyes. 6:43 a.m. Still half asleep, he thinks, okay, maybe it was a fleeting dream. Maybe I didn't actually hear anything. His eyes start slowly closing again, and there it is again. The same noise, the groan. It's like a muffled groan, but this time it feels louder, like it's getting closer. Something about the noise, it freaked him out. It freaked him out enough that he was sitting up in bed, high alert, his back was erect, he's pausing to listen for that groan again. At first it sounded like it was coming from inside of his room. And so motionless, he's practically holding his breath, hoping that it would help his ears work better. And there it was. But this time it sounded like it was coming from outside his room though, like the hallway. So he grabs his phone, swings his legs to the ground, and he starts tiptoeing to the hotel room door. Quietly, he presses up against the door and puts one eye in front of the peephole. He's like half expecting to see someone standing at his door, but he scans up and down, left and right, and he doesn't see a single thing. He doesn't see anyone. And he lets out like a small sigh. Then he backs up from the door, and then he freaking hears it again. The groan. Because he's closer to the door this time, the sound was much more clear, and it was also accompanied by another sound. The sound of something dragging, some sort of friction. So imagine someone dragging their duffel bag on the ground instead of carrying it by the straps. It's that sort of noise. Maybe Mr. Bing could have reasoned with himself. Okay, a hotel guest is clearly struggling with their oversized duffel bag, and instead of bringing it to their room, they're just dragging it. But there was just something about this groan earlier that sounded almost primal. He glanced at his door locks. Good. Double bolted. So he steps back into his room and starts speed walking to the hotel landline on the nightstand. Hi, sorry, for the past 10-15 minutes, I've been hearing some groaning. Good morning, Mr. Bing. You said you heard some groaning? Yeah, I think it's coming from the hallway, but it sounds like someone's been injured or something, like that type of groaning. I think someone's struggling. Yes, Mr. Bing. We'll get right on it. Look, groaning inside of a hotel, especially a hot vacation spot for couples, it's not the biggest emergency. The hotel staff, they prioritized a few other routine tasks and would only get to check up on Mr. Bing's complaint in 20 minutes after he first called. 20 minutes. Remember this for later because it's very important. When the hotel employee arrives on that floor, he steps out of the elevator and he listens. He's like, okay, there's no weird noises, there's no groaning. He turns the corner and he starts walking towards Mr. Bing's room, and his breath is knocked out of him. Around the corner, on the floor in front of him, lay the dead body of a young man. There was a trail of blood behind him. He had stab wounds all over his body, and it was very clear that he crawled out of his hotel room trying to escape.
Oh my gosh.
He most likely crawled on his stomach and then collapsed on his back when he could crawl no more. But there's more. He was completely nude and covered head to toe in blood. The hotel guest services employee starts panicking, and if he followed the blood trail, it would lead him directly to room 4223, just a few rooms down from Mr. Bing, who was in 4228. And inside room 4223, they would find another body, the young man's girlfriend. She was found unclothed in the bathtub. There was an open bottle of wine on the edge of the tub, as if she was just enjoying her vacation, enjoying a bath, before she was ambushed and murdered. Like, that's what the scene looks like. This took place in Bali. So the Bali Police Department, they quickly secure the crime scene. Forensic investigators start moving and they start collecting the evidence. The medical examiner is trying to identify the couple and they begin the autopsies. And it was clear neither of them died a natural death. Which are like, okay, yeah, I mean, I don't need to be a forensic expert to tell you that, right? In a truly bizarre, shocking, strange twist, Indonesian authorities very quickly deemed the case as there were no third parties. They said the boyfriend out in the hallway murdered his girlfriend and then ended things with himself.
What? In the hallway?
Yeah.
How does that make sense?
Exactly. So the two people that were found dead, they were Chinese nationals, meaning Chinese citizens. And netizens in both China and Indonesia, they start collectively voicing their concerns about the case. They're like, wait, hold on. There's so many pieces of evidence pointing to the fact that they were both murdered, right? So, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Even just looking at the crime scene, most people are like, this doesn't add up with what the authorities are saying happened. But there's even more. So the boyfriend in the hallway was found to be stabbed to death by a broken glass beer bottle. His own fingerprints were nowhere on the beer bottle. He had stab wounds on his back that would have been incredibly difficult for him to have inflicted on himself. And allegedly, his private parts had been severed off. And on top of that, his last text message to his mom just 2 days ago was, "They're trying to hurt me."
What?
And the couple, the victims, they're both very, very wealthy in the cryptocurrency community. So, I mean,
Wait, when was this though?
May of 2023. May 1st, 2023. It's an ongoing case.
Like 2 months ago.
Okay, well, it's not
3
an
months
ongoing
ago.
case, but yes.
What?
Yeah. So, I mean, every single piece of evidence seemed to point to the fact that this couple was tortured and brutalized in their hotel room. But here's where it gets even more puzzling. Indonesian authorities stated that they poured through the CCTV footage from the hallway. Nobody other than the couple themselves ever entered that room, nor did they exit. Not a single soul was caught on camera sneaking in, breaking in, or being invited into the couple's hotel room. So this very quickly became a locked room mystery. Were they murdered? If they weren't, what the hell happened? If they were, how did the murderer get in and how would they escape that room? And more importantly, why would someone want them dead? As always, full show notes are available at rottenmangopodcast.com. We did have Chinese researchers on this case, but I do understand that there is another aspect to this case. So if you guys are familiar, if you guys are Indonesian or are familiar with this case, please let us know if there was anything that was missed or anything mistranslated down in the comments. So most of our research was done using Mandarin sources. And as a legal disclaimer, as of filming, nobody has been prosecuted for these deaths. So the theories we're covering today are entirely speculative, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I feel like this whole case just feels very suspicious. And just one last disclaimer, violent crimes, they take place literally everywhere in the world. There is not a single person safe from being a victim of a crime or a single place that has no violent crime. And just because this crime takes place in Bali, Indonesia, does not speak to their crime rates, nor to your chance of being a victim of a violent crime there. So just, as always, critical thinking skills should be exercised before casting judgment on an entire city, country, and or population of people. I just always want to stress this when a crime takes place in an area which their economy is heavily reliant on tourism. So, just a preface. And with that being said, let's get into it. The Intercontinental Hotel in Bali is kind of like a vacationer's dream. It's a luxury resort with a private beach that only guests and staff of the Intercontinental Hotel can use. And it's like a paradise. You can choose a room that faces out into the water. That's what you wake up to, this amazing view. They have a doctor on call that's there all the time. You have nanny services, babysitting services, dry cleaning, valet. I mean, you've got a world-class spa downstairs. 6 different pools that you can choose from. You could go to a different pool every single day. They've got yoga classes, tennis courts on the property. I mean, it's part of the Intercontinental Hotel chain. They claim that they were the world's first international luxury travel hotel brand. And the chain is very much synonymous with like luxury and high-end stays. It's about $300 a night if you book early in advance. So to put it in comparison, you could actually find budget hotels in Bali for as little as $15. So these are going to be like your hostels. And then you can find mid-range hotels for about $40 to $100 a night. And luxury hotels go upwards of $200 a night. I mean, of course, you have the ultra-luxury 5-star hotels like the Bulgari Resort or like the St. Regis. Those go for like over $1,000 a night. But the Intercontinental in Bali, I mean, this is what you consider a luxury resort that international travelers from all over the world would be very excited to stay at. So 25-year-old Li Qiming, we're going to call him Li, and 22-year-old, his girlfriend, Chen Jianan, we're going to call her Jia, we're staying at the Intercontinental Hotel in Bali. Now, side note, considering this is a very, very new case and because of different privacy laws in other countries, we just don't have that much background on the couple. We don't have much about their personal lives as we normally do. So with that being said, we do know that people who knew the couple described them as the ideal Chinese couple. That's how they were talked about. So in terms of even just conventional beauty standards, both of them checked all the boxes. People said they looked like an idol couple. Like they're both very young, very fit, very conventionally attractive, and also incredibly wealthy. Yes, they had it all. So Lee, the boyfriend, he's got this very unique hairstyle. It's faded on the sides, and then at the top it's very long that he would put it into this sleek ponytail. And he just looked very unique in a very cool way. He had that aura about him. I mean, it made sense. You would look at him and he'd be like, oh, I'm in the crypto world. And you're like, that makes sense. You look like it. It's so cool. He looked very cool. He would always wear nice watches, drive nice cars, very indicative of his successful career. And Lee was said to have been a high school dropout, which a lot of people, that's impressive by his level of success. To become part of the 1% feels nearly impossible already. But in China, the statistics of becoming a self-made millionaire without daddy's money and without a degree from one of the top colleges in the nation, it's like a dog's dream, I guess we would say in Korean.
A dog's dream?
Yeah, it's like there's no point in even it's almost nonsense. It's so nonsensical. Don't even talk about it. It's not even a dream at this point.
I see.
Yeah, it's stupid, meaningless, and pointless to think about because it's never going to happen. But the fact that he made it happen and he was a multi-millionaire at 25 years old, very impressive. And then we have Jia, Lee's 22-year-old girlfriend. She was studying broadcasting at university, and people said she was very pleasant. She was very fun to be around, and everyone described her of just being very gentle. She had what they called a good temper. Okay, which it sounds weird in America to be like, a good temper? Who describes someone as having a good temper? A lot of people in a lot of Asian countries will describe people like that, and it just means that they're very patient, rational, very good at handling their emotions. It's like a common way to describe people these days. It's someone with a lot of positive traits. So Jia made a lot of friends in college, and she just really liked to document her life on social media. And from the outside, this couple was perfect. And maybe they were. Jia would post about her cute relationship. Lee was always so kind to her, and they started dating in 2021, so they had been together for 2 years now. He constantly just whisked her away on all these trips around the world. I mean, some of their favorite spots were Malaysia, Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia. He bought her designer bags. She was always in his Rolls Royces or all of his other supercars because this guy is very wealthy.
Wow.
But they weren't annoying. They both valued family and friends. So they're not like, ooh, I only care about money and I only care about flexing. They had a huge social circle of people that they really loved spending time with. And as much as they loved having money, both of them did not come from wealthy backgrounds. Instead of being jealous, those close to the couple, they said that they were really proud of just how far they'd come. To go against all odds and make it, you can't help but be impressed by someone like that. And I think 25-year-old Lee, being that young, making that amount of money, I don't think his friends and family would have been surprised if he was like, you know what? I just want to date around. I want to see what kind of women are out there. I want to see who I can date. but he was so serious about Gia. I mean, prior to their Bali vacation, he basically told everyone that he was going to marry her. In America, that sounds like he said, hey guys, I'm going to propose to her, right? In China, it's interesting. There is an action that you can take that is more serious than proposing. It shows a higher level of commitment than proposing. And that is changing your household registration from one city to another city. Like, this is bigger than moving in together, bigger than proposing. This is basically signing the marriage license. This was kind of mind-blowing for me, so hopefully I can explain it well. So in China, household registration systems exist, just like how you could be registered to Orange County in California or LA County in California. But it's not like the US, where all your registration means, oh, that's the amount of property taxes you pay, or it's not even about voting. I believe you cannot even buy a house in certain cities unless you are registered to that city.
Yeah.
So unless you have a Beijing registration, you can't buy a condo, apartment, or house in Beijing,
Yeah.
even if you have the money. So major cities, everyone's trying to migrate for opportunities like Beijing, Shanghai, and they have registration caps. So you can't save up money to move there and buy a place. You have to physically switch your registration. So at first, the system was put into place to control the mass movement of people just moving to the bigger cities and trying to prevent overpopulation. But now it's almost a gatekeeper of socioeconomic mobility, meaning the system assigns each person to a household registration unit based on their place of birth or their parents' place of birth. And people registered to rural areas have fewer opportunities than the ones that are registered to urban areas. And it's like purely based on birth location. So it keeps rich city residents rich and poor rural residents poor. The household registration can impact a person's access to healthcare, education, employment, and other social services. So the system has been highly criticized for just its discriminatory effects. It's even heavily impacting societal trends. This is so fascinating. Marrying someone with a Beijing or Shanghai household registration is like marrying a US citizen. Like, yes, love is probably a prerequisite, but it's also a chance to move to what is often perceived by a lot of people as a place with more opportunities. I believe in recent years, China is trying to reform this whole system, but I think as far as like 2014, you can do it as long as you get a job in that city, but it's just very complicated. And that is why him changing his household registration to Gia City is like, I am so committed to this girl. Like, I'm ready to move there and uproot my life. I want to marry this girl. That's the level of commitment. And this specific trip to Bali, it was supposed to be a graduation gift for Gia since she's about to graduate with her broadcasting degree. Unfortunately, neither of them would make it back home alive. So their bodies were found on May 1st. And 5 days after, on May 6th, the official social media account called Bali Chinese Consulate released a statement. And I've shortened it for all the parts that matter. And it says, 2 Chinese citizens were found dead at the Intercontinental Hotel in Bali a few days ago. The Chinese consulate is working closely with the local police and is continuing to follow the case's progress. We have briefed the families to go to Bali to deal with the aftermath. We are working with the Chinese consulate to ensure the personal safety of Chinese citizens traveling in Bali. It did not do what I think they thought it would do. I mean, I think they thought, okay, this is good enough to make everyone feel like we're all working together. We're all working on it. But instead, they didn't answer anything. There were no further answers or a statement that made the case feel kind of tied up. And this pushed this to headlines all over China. Chinese netizens were like, wait, what just happened? 2 Chinese wealthy tourists in a very nice luxury resort were found dead? A young couple? What's going on? And in growing media reports, more information was released about the crime scene, as well as leaked photos from the crime scene, which please, if you are doing your own research on this case, please be careful. The crime scene photos on this case are very scary, easy to access and to view, and the families of the victims have asked they not be spread or shared, so just please be careful. Anyway, more updates are given to the public about the crime scene, and everyone is just kind of scratching their heads. They're trying to piece together the scene, and just to like visually walk you through the crime scene before we get to the autopsies. It was reported that the living room inside the hotel room was ransacked. So there were certain parts of their room that were fine, and then certain parts where there were just like random broken beer bottles, there were blood splatter on the walls. It just looked like a mess. But the thing is, nothing was stolen. And that becomes a big thing later. So it's not like someone ransacked the place and they're like, ha, I got your watch, I got your jewelry, now let's go. It kind of looked like a fight had broken out. And then Gia was found unclothed in the bathtub. Her body was half submerged in water and her pajamas were tied tightly around her neck. There were streaks of blood all over the ground in the hotel room, and one continuous streak that led out of the hotel room and down the hallway of the second floor. I know it's confusing because the room is 4223, but it's the second floor. So that's what the crime scene looks like. But what else? What about the autopsies? Can they tell us something the crime scene doesn't? Let's start with Gia's. Gia had been killed in the bathtub, and unlike Lee, her boyfriend, she had 0 open wounds. Because remember how I said he was stabbed with a broken beer bottle? She had 0 open wounds. None. There were some shallow, non-fatal, not really like bleeding cuts on her neck, almost like scratches. There was nothing that would lead to her to bleed much. Her neck was dark with bruises, and her PJs were still wrapped around her neck when she was brought into the morgue. She did, however, have multiple bruises on her right hand, right knee, and the right side of her forehead. So it looked like someone took a blunt, not sharp, not something that could pierce her skin and break open the skin, but like a blunt, dull object and hit her on the right side of the head with it, potentially on her knees and hands as well. They looked more like wounds that someone would have inflicted to kind of subdue someone rather than kill. Like, I'm just trying to gain control over this situation. But it didn't look like someone was hitting her with the force and intent to kill her with that. Going by the autopsy, it was likely that Gia was ambushed while she was taking a bath. Someone or multiple individuals walked in, saw her pajamas laying on the floor or the chair, grabbed those, hit her on the head with a blunt object to subdue her, and then strangled her to death with her own pajamas. And originally, it was believed that she was killed by the pajamas and that she had died of manual strangulation. But the autopsy showed that the truth was much more unfortunate. Authorities believe she put up a fight. So she was splashing around the bath to try and fight off the killer or killers, but ultimately the water was a big problem. Gia was found with foam at her nose and mouth areas, which can point to the fact that she improperly inhaled water. Meaning, while she's fighting off her killer or killers, she's inhaling water and it's going down the wrong pipe. It's going down her airways. She died partially from strangulation and partially from drowning.
What?
Water was found in her respiratory tract. She would have likely felt like she was being waterboarded, is what the sources say. Like, have you guys ever drank water, but it enters the wrong tube, is kind of how you call it, like the quote, wrong tube, and it goes down your trachea? Your body will start reacting instantly. You're going to have like a coughing fit. Your eyes are going to water, and it's an uncontrollable response. Like, no matter how much you try to hold it in, you're going to be coughing up a storm. But since Gia was also being strangled at the same time, she was unable to cough up some of that water. So it was a very brutal, gruesome death, and this becomes important later. Now, let's go over Lee, the boyfriend's autopsy. Lee had more than 20 open wounds across his neck, both sides of his torso, chest, and back. His back. So not like where the obliques are, but his back. This is so important later, so keep it in mind. The largest wounds were measured to be about 5 inches long. So that's like a little bit shorter than the length of most smartphones. So look at your phone, right? The depths of the wounds varied, so some were deep, but a lot of them seemed to be very shallow. Also keep that in note, But don't worry, I'm going to remind you later too. The shape, angle, and cut of his wounds, they matched a glass beer broken bottle edge. So most likely, someone had smashed a beer bottle, broken the glass of it, and then started stabbing him with it. And Lee's cause of death was loss of blood. So to give you more context on how bad this is, none of his injuries were instantly fatal. So it wasn't like there was a knife or a sharp object to his heart or to his brain. The wounds were just deep enough to keep him very much alive. So alive that he was able to crawl for help for 20 minutes as he slowly bled to death. He died from blood loss. In order for an average adult human being to die of blood loss, they need to lose about 1/3 to 1/2 of their total blood volume. Which, if you think about it, that's a lot of blood. It said that an average human male has about 1.5 gallons of blood. And if you lose about half of it, that's about 12 cups of blood, or like 2 of these of blood. Remember how I mentioned the crime scene photos were released? Well, there was a detail that netizens saw in them, and they were kind of waiting for this to be in the autopsy results for Lee. I do just want to make it clear that authorities, the media, news sources have never reported on this particular part of the case. It's mainly a discussion held by netizens on forums, but it is a huge part of this case in whole, so I can't not include it. The crime scene photos seem to depict Lee without his private parts. The pictures are incredibly pixelated, so nobody can really say with 100% confidence. A few netizens pointed it out, and many more netizens wanted to call them out for being conspiracy theorists. But it seems like when they saw the crime scene photos, they too came to the same theories and speculations. I would say like 90% of netizens were like, yeah, I feel like they were severed off. And they argued, sure, you could say that this happened sometime else, or maybe it was like a genetic condition, but like, what are the odds of that? It looks like it must be connected to this case. I did unfortunately come across the photos multiple times during the research, and I do not advise you to look for them. Just by looking at the picture, I don't think that there's any way to tell with certainty. Like, none of this is 100%. That, like, the pictures, like I said, are incredibly pixelated. So again, this is just what a lot of netizens were saying. And they were looking for this detail in the autopsy, and it wasn't there. So they were like, that's a little weird. So this suggestion, this theory that Lee's private parts were cut off plays a huge role in a lot of the theories of what happened to the couple later. So that's the only reason I'm bringing it up. And then, of course, no crime can happen on vacation without this becoming a huge point of contention, which is, let's go over the toxicology reports. The reports revealed absolutely zero pesticides, dangerous drugs, narcotics, or alcohol present in both of their bodies. What? Okay, so many contradictions in this. Gia was literally found in a bathtub with an open bottle of wine next to the tub, as if she was enjoying her bath. There were beer bottles everywhere in the room. What about that? Honestly, I don't know what to tell you. We tried going through a bunch of different articles and statements, even forums, and authorities don't really ever address this inconsistency. So I guess it could be argued that the couple maybe drank a little bit, but metabolized the alcohol, and maybe their toxicology tests weren't done right away, because on average, alcohol is only detectable in the deceased for about 48 hours postmortem. So maybe it was done after that. Either way, maybe they didn't drink at all, or they metabolized it and too much time had passed before the medical examiners could test. With all of these details being leaked to the press, netizens in China and Indonesia, they're getting riled up. I mean, everyone cannot believe it. Like, there was a brutal double homicide in a luxury intercontinental hotel in Bali. Netizens all agreed the killers need to be caught. They need to be put behind bars. This should have been the top priority for authorities. So while all of this is unraveling online, Indonesian authorities decide to hold a press conference. This is 2 weeks after the deaths, and everyone assumed it would be another update, or maybe some bombshell information would be dropped. Maybe suspects and arrest would be announced, maybe motives would be revealed, uncovered. Netizens from both nations are just on the edge of their seat trying to get answers, and the police said, there are no suspects. There are no arrests, and there will be no further investigation. We are closing this case. There were no third parties involved. Lee had murdered his girlfriend and then taken his own life.
Wow, come on.
People's jaws were on the floor, but the authorities, they're like, we've got our own reasoning behind it. Okay? And you're like, okay, let's hear it, right? Maybe it's more than we could have thought. Maybe they're smarter than us. Indonesian authorities stated they pulled CCTV footage from the hotel hallway. You could see the door to room 4223, which was the couple's room. You can't see in their room, obviously, but if the door opens, you can see people coming in and out. There was no way in and out of that door without being caught on CCTV cameras. April 30th of 2023 at 8 p.m., Gia walked into the Intercontinental Hotel alone.
She arrived at the hotel alone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
She checks into the hotel alone. The reservation is under her name alone. Lee, the boyfriend, is nowhere in sight until 5 hours later. He comes into the hotel past midnight. Security footage shows Gia coming down to the lobby to meet up with Lee. They stand there talking for a few minutes till they both turn and go into the elevators together. They were seen walking into room 4223 together, and Gia would never walk back out alive.
That was the first night they got there.
No, they were actually at a different hotel the previous nights. They arrived in Bali like 2 nights before this.
Okay.
But they were at a different hotel. And
So they
that's
just checked in
to this one.
on May 1st?
No, the last day of April.
And then it became May 1st.
Yes.
Past 12. Okay.
And it's that also becomes a point of contention that we're going to get to. Why were they at different hotels? Because usually if you're only at they were there for like 5 nights. Well, they were supposed to be in Bali for like 5 nights. If you're at a destination for 5 nights, you typically wouldn't go to multiple different hotels.
Do we know what hotel?
No, it was not released. I'm pretty sure the authorities, as well as Chinese authorities, probably know.
Okay.
Yes. So they walk into room 4223 together, and Gia would never walk back out alive. Lee, on the other hand, was caught on the hallway cameras coming out of the room at 12:50 a.m. So about 45 minutes later,
No
he
way.
walks out of the room. He leaves for like a short second and then promptly returns to the room.
Where did he go?
Nobody knows. So I don't
do you
know
mean?
if it's the public doesn't know or if the authorities also don't know, right? I mean, we can only speculate. Did he step out to take a call? I don't know if he was on the phone. Did he go to get something? Was it a smoke break? All we know is he doesn't step out for long, so it doesn't seem like he goes anywhere outside of the hotel property. We also know that he wasn't seen taking anything in or out during this time. Some people speculate that maybe Gia was starting to take a bath at this point and he stepped out to use the restroom downstairs. The hotel room probably only had one restroom and maybe he wasn't comfortable using it while she was trying to have a nice relaxing bath. That makes a lot of sense to a lot of couples. Again, this is purely speculation. Nobody knows why he briefly stepped out of that room, but it was pretty brief. He gets back into the room and he orders room service at around 1:17 a.m. Hotel staff deliver the food, and from then on, for the next couple of hours, nobody is seen in the hallway CCTV camera going in nor out of that room. 6:23 a.m., 5 hours later, the door cracks open and a bloody hand grabs at the carpet of the door's threshold. A bloodied arm reaches out as the body of a man crawls from the door into the hallway. Lee is fully nude and covered in blood. He is clearly dying and crawling for help, almost as if he's moving in slow motion. It seems he was using every last bit of energy that he had to keep crawling forward. His mouth was said to have been seen opening and closing as he groaned for help. He crawled for 23 minutes.
No freaking way.
At 6:55 a.m., he would collapse from exhaustion and blood loss. Mr. Bing, from the beginning of this story, called the hotel front desk at around 6:43 a.m.
When did he get out again?
6:23, and then he was collapsed at 6:55.
And Mr. Bean called at 6:43.
Yeah, about like 12 minutes.
So 12 minutes he was still technically alive.
Yes. He was crawling through the hallway, very much alive at this time. And it's hard to say if the hotel staff came right away, would it have changed the outcome? We don't know. I don't think we'll ever know the answer to that. But the timing is later very important, and it does paint all of this in a much sinister light, if that's even possible. So the Indonesian authorities, they give their interpretation of the CCTV footage. They believe, based on the footage they have, that the couple were fighting at Hotel A. Their original, yes?
I'm so sorry. I think the biggest question everyone wants to know is there another access point to the room? Is there a window, back door, beach? There is.
There is, but the Indonesian authorities hide this from the public as well as Chinese authorities for a very long time.
Wow.
So they present the evidence as if, look, we have the CCTV footage. No one went in through the door. So it was implied it was a locked room mystery until people found out what floor that room was on and found out it had a balcony that was easily accessible. It's on the second floor, and in the back there's no CCTV cameras.
So second floor, that's still above the ground floor, right?
Yes.
But you say someone can find a way to get in.
Yeah.
It's easy to get in.
Very easy.
Really?
Yeah. So, they believe, based on the footage they have, that the couple were fighting at their original hotel reservation. So, Hotel A. They booked it, they checked in, they're trying to have a nice vacation, and then they start fighting for whatever reason. They're basically saying that this fight, this relationship trouble would lead to Lee killing his girlfriend and then cutting his own life short. They said, after some investigating, they realized that Lee and Gia had no plans to originally stay at the Intercontinental Hotel in Bali in the first place, meaning that they were staying at Hotel A, got into a fight, and later that night, Gia checks into the Intercontinental by herself. Authorities stated that they believed that the couple had gotten into such an explosive fight that Gia was like, I don't even want to sleep in the same hotel as you. Which people thought was odd because you would just get another room inside the hotel typically, especially when you're in a foreign country. Like maybe if you're in your home country, you're like, okay, like I speak the language, I know where I am, I'm just gonna go to a different hotel in the city. But usually resorts in places like Bali, they're massive. You could easily go to the other side of the hotel and never cross paths. But they say it got so bad, Gia decides she's going to leave and check into a separate hotel by herself to get away from Lee. She checks into the Intercontinental Hotel alone. But by the time that Lee comes to be with her, it seems like the tension had fizzled out and they made up. Authorities believe they briefly made up before they started fighting again inside the room, and this time the fight became deadly. They said, quote, Lee killed Gia with heavy blows, binding her around the neck and finally drowning her in a bathtub. Lee took his own life afterwards by slashing his throat and inflicting self-wounds with a broken beer bottle. The deaths were ruled with no third parties involved, based on the examination of the victims' bodies performed by the forensic labs of the Bali police. Now, at this point, many people still believe that Gia and Lee were attacked and murdered, and they did not agree with what the authorities stated what had happened. But they were confused because, like, how did the killer get into the room in the first place? Like, had they already been hiding in the room? Were there secret tunnels into the room? There were a ton of speculations online. There were no answers. And because there were no answers, some people started believing the authorities were right. They were like, you know what, domestic violence and toxic relationships, they're senseless, they're confusing, and a lot of people that have not been in these types of situations, they just cannot wrap their heads around it because it sounds crazy to think that someone could do this to their partner while they're in love, while they're on vacation, but this is the reality of a lot of people's lives. But still, what the other netizens just could not understand was, that's one thing, but why did the police close the case after only 2 weeks of investigation? And it's not like they presented some irrefutable information during the press conference that definitively ruled the case their theory. It just felt like there were so many different possibilities of what really happened, so many missing gaps, and they were just ignoring it. Too many loose ends, too many things that weren't addressed, and too many things that just could not be explained. First of all, there was no motive. I mean, yes, every couple can seem perfect from the outside. Do we really know what's going on if in relationships behind closed doors? No. But netizens from both countries felt like there just wasn't enough reason for Lee to murder Gia. It stated that not a single person reported Lee from his personal life, never reported Lee ever being aggressive to Gia or anyone else for that matter. It did not seem like he was hiding an angry, violent side from social media. But again, that doesn't mean he didn't have it in him. But a lot of netizens said, beyond that logically, there was no reason for Lee to kill Gia. He could have just broken up with her. It's not like they were married. She was not entitled to his money. He was the one bringing in money. Why would someone with that amount of money risk everything, for what? But then people are like, you just don't know unless you've been in relationships with these types of toxic people. It could just be that it was a scenario of, oh, well, if I can't have her, nobody can. Usually these types of toxic relationships, they have other accompanying signs. That's what people stated online. No friends of the couple reported feeling even remotely that Lee was controlling over Gia or was maintaining some sort of hold over her. In fact, both of them had pretty big, lively social lives. There were also no signs or reports of domestic abuse, violence, and Lee did not have a history of crimes against women. And again, just because people haven't come forward to report these things doesn't mean it can't be true. In fact, more people came out to argue the other version though. Lee's mom came out to state that there was no way that her son would ever hurt Gia. I know, She said he was in love with her, wanted a future with her, he cherished her, she was one of the most important people in his life. But of course, his mom is gonna say something like that, right? That's like what moms say about their kids, about their sons too. It spoke volumes though, when Gia's own mother came forward to say, I do not believe that he would ever harm my daughter. He loved her. She could feel it. She could see it whenever she saw them together. This was big for netizens because typically in Asian households, there really is that mother-in-law stereotype where the mother-in-laws usually never think that their children's partners are good enough for them. So for her to go against the authorities' theory, she must have truly felt like Lee was incapable of harming her own kid. She's like, that's my kid, yes, but I just don't think he would do that to her. So all of it just felt odd to netizens. Now, let's go over the alleged argument that the couple had and the fact that they had multiple different hotel reservations. First of all, it's unclear if they even for sure had an argument that night. That's just what the authorities have gathered from the footage. They could have easily booked different reservations and switched up hotels. And we're going to get into all the possible reasonings and explanations on why they would do something like that later. But even if they did have an argument, netizens wondered, does that really warrant a motive for such a gruesome crime? On top of that, photo evidence at the crime scene showed a red wine bottle next to Gia in the bathtub. I don't know the last time any of my friends or myself had gotten into a fight with their partner and was like, you know what, I'm going to take a bath while the partner is in the room. That's the last thing you want to do. You're not in the mood for that. You're angry, you're upset. And it seemed to netizens that the couple fought that night. Let's say they did. They'd already moved on. They were in the process of making up. I mean, the bath, the room service, they were both found nude. It seemed like they were having a rather romantic night before it was brutally cut short. But I would say the biggest factor that people didn't believe the police theory was the way Lee was found dead.
Yeah, I think that's hard evidence. Like you say, he got stabs on the back and a broken beer bottle. What are you talking about?
It's one of those things where, it's possible, but human psychology dictates otherwise. It's so unreasonable that it doesn't make sense. But I guess the authorities' argument is, murdering your girlfriend is unreasonable. So he was already doing something unreasonable.
You said there's stab on the back, correct?
Technically, he could. But it's who does that?
Wow.
So it was very clear, authorities stated it was clear that Gia was murdered. And it could be easily argued that Lee was the one who killed her. We don't know, but you could just argue because he was technically in the room. But the way that Lee was found dead, nobody could wrap their minds around the idea that he did this to himself. It was just so incongruent with the way that people typically end their own lives. So according to the police, he ended things by slashing his whole body and throat with the edge of a broken glass beer bottle. If he really wanted to make such a dire choice, there are much quicker ways and much less painful ways to do so. The probability that Lee inflicted more than 20 shallow open wounds to himself is highly unlikely.
That's like torture.
Yes.
Exactly. That's torture. The main purpose of that is torture.
That's what people are saying. The fact that he had so many shallow cuts too. I mean, it's not even just someone wanted to kill him. It's like someone wanted to torture him. Why would he do that to himself? Yeah. Now, let's say for devil's advocate's sake, Lee in fact did kill his girlfriend and then realized he was going to go to jail for a very long time and made the drastic choice to end things as well. Lee was found in the hallway crawling and crying for help. Even if he had, in the crazy chance, done this to himself, he passed in a way that suggested he regretted his choice at the very last minute, right? And of course, you could argue that human survival instincts, they kick in strong, right? But why would he crawl out of the room then? The natural response would be for him to, call the concierge, call the front desk, call emergency services.
Oh my gosh, I just got chills from that. That means somebody or something is there
to prevent him from calling for help.
He's trying to run away. Oh my God. And the person in there can't come out because of camera.
Yes.
Oh my God.
That is the clear logical reason for, logical way for him to survive. So if it was truly just him and Gia in the room, why didn't he call? Yeah.
Wow.
And like you just said, it's common knowledge that the only guaranteed places inside of a hotel without cameras is inside the suites, and the hallways are typically known to be lined with CCTV cameras. So even if the alleged killers wanted to chase after him, they probably knew it was smart to not, and they probably hoped that he would die from his injuries before getting help. Also, one more thing to note. Statistically, it's not common for people to be found dead with self-inflicted wounds and be naked, unless they are in a bath. It is stated to already be such an emotional, vulnerable moment, and it's said that human psychology dictates that people making these types of decisions typically don't want to add another layer of insecurity and vulnerability. Lee was unclothed, not just in the room, but also in the hallway where he crawled out for 20 minutes. And again, this next part is just human psychology speculations from forums that I've seen, like netizens. So this is not like certified psychologists or any sort of studies that were done, but they were saying how if you really had a man who exerted so much control and power over their partners, over their girlfriends, to the point of murdering them, this is typically an egotistical, narcissistic man. These types of men will not want to be found naked and vulnerable and in these defeating positions by other people.
Yeah.
So for him to crawl out into the hallway naked, looking for help, that is not the way most, if it was his choice, most egotistical, narcissistic men would choose to go about things. They were saying, so it's just kind of like it doesn't match up. So like suddenly he's this evil man, kills his girlfriend, and then suddenly he's like, oh, forget my ego.
Yeah.
It was weird. And at first everyone was like, okay, maybe the Bali police are in over their heads. Like maybe they're used to dealing with crimes that come from a tourist heavy area. Maybe they only deal with theft, drunk and disorderly conduct, like things of that nature. And maybe they did not have what it takes to investigate murder, a double homicide. And the hotel being a luxury hotel, they truly thought that the groans were just coming from couples enjoying their early Monday morning. This is where things take a much more sinister turn. The hotel was asked about why it took so long for them to investigate the call that Mr. Bing had made about the groans and the noise complaints. It seemed like he clearly stated to the front desk that something felt wrong. He didn't just say, hey guys, there's a noise complaint. I'm trying to sleep and my neighbors are groaning. He called, he was on edge. He said, it sounds like it's coming from the hallway. So Mr. Bing called at around 6:43 a.m. According to the CCTV footage, it looked like Lee had passed at around 6:55 a.m. According to the hotel, they received the call from Mr. Bing, and they actually didn't check on other priorities. They made this their priority, and they assumed, this is weird, they assumed a guest was injured in the hallway, so they, quote, searched for a wheelchair before going to the scene.
What?
What are you saying? The explanation literally goes against all logic, and not to mention the Intercontinental's own protocol. According to other employees of other Intercontinental hotels, the appropriate protocol is taught in all the hotels across the board, and you investigate the complaint and move on to resolve the issue from there. You don't get a complaint and blindly search for a wheelchair. Imagine you get the complaint and the reality is that a guest is choking on their room service. You waste precious time searching for a wheelchair that's not even needed. Like imagine choking at a hotel and the guest services is like, someone get me a wheelchair pronto. You'd be like, what are you saying? So why would you assume you would even need a wheelchair right now? And to add to that, Intercontinental staff, at least said other hotel chains, have stated that they have ways to check security cameras live feed within the hotel. They didn't even glance to see if there was something strange going on that floor outside of Mr. Bing's room.
They didn't?
Didn't. Or at least they stated they didn't.
So someone was slacking, you think, or?
It's a theory later. The hotel was in on it, is the theory later. Well, maybe not the hotel. I don't want to say the hotel because that makes it seem like Intercontinental Hotels as a chain, as a corporation was in on it. But hotel employees of that specific location, it's alleged that they were in on something.
Okay, could you remind me what time they arrive at the scene?
20 minutes later, so like 7, a little after 7. So like probably 10 minutes after he passed.
Oh, so let's say if somebody can see the live footage, then they can see exactly what is happening.
Yeah.
And they could likely choose to arrive
later.
At a later time.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
These are just speculations and allegations. So please, and like I said, Intercontinental Hotel as a chain, no one is really saying that the corporation, like the corporate itself, has anything to do with this. Like at the most, they probably had no idea about any of this and it was like a rogue employee. That's like the most of the speculations and allegations. So it was reported that Mr. Bing stated that the sound was coming from the hallway. And again, no one really checked, or at least it seems like no one checked the hotel hallway cameras, because if they had checked, they would have seen Lee crawling and covered in blood. And I can't imagine they would look for a wheelchair then.
Yeah, I just don't buy that. You know, anybody is taught, if you see something like that, call 911 or call emergency service. No one is ever taught growing up, look for a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Like that's just so against emergency protocol. Like no one ever done that.
And I also think, okay, let's say they didn't have access to the security footage, live feed. I still just don't see, like, I'm trying to really put myself in a situation where I get a call about groans coming from a hallway. I just feel like I would go to the hallway and look around real quick.
Yeah.
And then if I see someone, I'd be like, oh my God, this like elderly woman has fallen. Like we need a wheelchair, right?
Yeah, or you just call some emergency service first and then do like, or trying to save their life.
I just don't see myself like having no idea what's going on.
You know what's weird?
Yes.
You call you put someone on a wheelchair and then do what? Bring them to hospital or bring them to help.
Yeah.
Did they even call the
No.
hospital? If they didn't call hospital, why would you need wheelchair?
Oh, because maybe there's a nurse's office there because they have a doctor on call. I don't know if they have an office.
Then you should have called the doctor
to come with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You need wheelchair to transport people.
Yeah,
you don't save people by putting them on wheelchair.
Yeah, the wheelchair does nothing.
Exactly. You should usually you call doctor and then you put them on the wheelchair to transport them to the doctor or to the hospital.
Yeah, that is so weird.
Yeah, that is so sketchy.
Yeah, this whole wheelchair thing is so bizarre. Like, I just cannot see myself in a million years being like, there's a report that someone might be injured. I have no idea what kind of injury it is. Let me just waste precious time.
Or transport them to anywhere.
Oh, that's also true. Like, the number one thing is someone falls, don't move them.
Yeah.
Until you get a doctor who knows what they're doing, because you can mess up their spine.
Exactly.
It is weird. Yeah. I mean, now that you're like breaking it down, it's even weirder. So people online are like, that doesn't even make sense. I mean, what? So this detail would not only anger netizens, but it would draw suspicion on the hotel staff, right? But all of these loose ends still don't address one big detail. How did the killer or the killers get into the couple's room without being caught on the hallway CCTV camera? It's a locked room mystery. That's exactly what the Chinese authorities wanted to get to the bottom of. 2 wealthy Chinese nationals died in a popular tourist spot for Chinese citizens. China was not having it. They demanded answers. And it seemed that China was not happy with the explanation given by the Bali Police Department. And with enough pressure, a few new key pieces of evidence were released by the Indonesian government. It seemed like for whatever reason, they were trying to keep these details hidden and unknown for some time. Most likely because it went against their theories. So the first piece of evidence is reportedly the beer bottle that they claimed to have matched as the weapon of self-infliction, the broken beer bottle. It did not have any of these fingerprints on it. None. Not to mention the method of stabbing oneself to the point of no return is so rare that it's almost a phenomenon, and that's with a knife. A broken beer bottle is horribly jagged and not that sharp, and a very painful instrument to use to cut oneself. And stabbing to cut one's life short is one of the rarest methods. And of course, it's not unheard of, but it normally occurs statistically in young men who have had a long history of severe mental disorders. Most of them had to have some sort of medical record that depicts a big history of mental illness, and these characteristics were not similar to Lee at all. So now add to the fact that he had wounds on his back and his fingerprints were not found on the bottle, it just doesn't make sense. And in even more explosive news, remember the Indonesian government was like, look, nobody was seen entering and exiting, so no third party was involved. Yeah, well, the unit has a balcony that has no CCTV in the area. Meaning someone could have come onto the property and gotten in and out of the balcony entrance without being caught on a single CCTV camera. The fact that they neglected to even address this or even acknowledge it, because they could have acknowledged it and been like, okay, but this A, B, C, and D evidence shows why that wouldn't have happened. They didn't even do that. It's almost like we're like, if we don't mention it, no one will know that there's another entrance. And as long as we keep emphasizing the CCTV footage and no one going in and out of that door, then it makes it seem like there was no other way in. It's like very conveniently omitting evidence to just be like, what are you oh, we're not really like lying. You know, we never said there's no other entrance. We just omitted it. And lastly, another very suspicious detail is just a few days after the incident, the hotel cleaned up the entire room and changed out the carpets. The crime scene was literally wiped from this earth, meaning no further investigation, if desired by any nation, could be conducted. And sure, they gotta clean up the hallway. I get that, the hallway, right? They are a business, they need to make money, they have employees whose livelihoods depend on the hotel making a profit, but there's a drastic difference in the Intercontinental's staff's reaction time of cleaning up a crime scene versus responding to a security or potential health risk. This is the allegation. Like, people online were saying, you know, it's one thing to be super lazy, like a super lazy business. Like, we have a possible guest safety or security threat complaint. Let's just look for a wheelchair or something and like prolong this because we're lazy. We don't want to go look. We'll get to it when we get to it. We have a crime scene. Okay, fine. We'll clean it eventually. But a lot of netizens were saying the energy was just so different. Like, they were so slow and took their time with the security and safety complaint that Mr. Bing made, and yet so quick and ready to clean up the crime scene. This made netizens wonder, did they clean up the crime scene so they could resume operation, or was their intention to eliminate all pieces of evidence? Or maybe it was both. So if it was a double homicide, what happened? Was there even a theory that could tie up all of these loose ends? The first theory is robbery. Now, this is actually one of the least popular theories, but let's at least cover it. Some netizens said this was a robbery gone wrong. There have been reports and anecdotes of wealthy Chinese tourists getting robbed in foreign countries while on vacation. Because in the global economic scale, Chinese tourists are pretty known now for having a lot of buying power. Whether or not that's true, maybe there's only like anecdotal evidence that they have a lot of buying power and now it's just become like a stereotype. But they have become targets in countries all over the world, including in Europe, in the United States, and probably Indonesia as well. Chinese tourists were becoming synonymous with rich or having a lot of cash on them, and that made them targets when they travel. So maybe when they landed in Bali, they were followed, or Gia was specifically targeted when she entered the Intercontinental Hotel because she was a wealthy Chinese tourist checking in alone, a woman that could easily be overpowered. She was, quote, the perfect robbery victim. It was even suggested that there was a whole robust industry in tourist towns where hotel staff or even just one or two employees within luxury resorts will collude with outside thieves and give information on which room or who was traveling alone who appeared to have a lot of valuables on them. And they themselves would not do anything, but these thieves would come into the correct rooms. They would be told where the cameras are, who to target, get in, get out, and then they would split the profits. According to a guest that stayed at the Intercontinental in April, so barely a month prior, she said security there was, quote, just okay. She said there was a gate with a guard at the entrance of the hotel, but they just let in everyone. Like, they never checked to see if you're staying at the hotel or if you're visiting a restaurant there or if you're visiting a guest. They just smile and let you in unless you look so noticeably suspicious. But she's saying nobody who has plans to do anything bad that's going to be successful at it looks suspicious, you know? To be fair, this is pretty normal for most resorts all around the world, but it just added to the theory because it would have been easy for thieves to get in and out of the hotel without sounding off any alarms or suspicion. Other guests stated that that wouldn't have been the only way in and out either. They said that the Intercontinental Hotel in Bali boasts about having a private beach. I don't know how I feel about upscale resorts having private beaches because it excludes the locals from having access to the beaches that they literally live in this town in. But that's a conversation for another day. They have a private beach, and while there are signs on the beach that say private property of the Intercontinental Hotel, former guests reported that anyone could enter the beach. There were no guards, no regulations, and people did come to the private beach even if they weren't staying at the hotel. A former guest reported it was pretty bad. They stated that the beach was often filled with outsiders and random strangers who clearly were not hotel guests or staff. Again, I don't know how to feel about locals not having access to their own beaches in their town and every desirable shoreline just being like bought out by these luxury hotel chains for wealthy travelers, but it does show that security was maybe not tip-top at this resort. Netizens who believe the robbery theory think the crime ended up being so gruesome because they theorized robbers turned attackers probably weren't expecting Lee, the boyfriend, to be there. As mentioned, Jia checked into the hotel alone, and Lee came around midnight. He didn't check in with any staff or the front desk. Jia came down to the lobby to pick him up herself and bring him up to the room. It's possible that the employee who leaked the information to the robbery group didn't know that Jia would have company. So everyone involved probably assumed that she was still alone, and when they entered, they were taken aback that Lee was there, he had seen their faces, and he was ready to attack them. So things kind of spiraled out of control. Huge altercation broke out. Now, this theory isn't foolproof because nothing valuable was taken from their room. On top of that, the economy in Bali is heavily supported by tourism, and usually those types of places, in my personal anecdotal opinion, I think are safer from theft, if I'm going to be honest with you. Okay, so a lot of netizens also pointed this out, and I agree with it, but when you visit a hotel in New York City, the economy in New York City for sure benefits from tourism, domestic tourism, and international travelers, but the economy itself is already so well established outside of tourism. So for example, in 2021, tourism directly accounted for about 3.27% of New York City's GDP, whereas in Bali, that number is said to be around 61%. So a lot of netizens are saying, sure, in Bali, you might have a rogue hotel employee that steals something from your room or swipes something when you're not looking, but the chances of having an organized robbery ring is more likely in cities where tourism is not the backbone of the GDP. Because it would be super short-sighted for employees to consistently rob guests. It would literally ruin the entire place's reputation, not just the hotel, but this entire tourist spot. They would risk their own jobs, their own livelihoods, the whole area's economy. If tourists heard stories of being robbed nonstop in Bali, they are most likely not going to go on vacation there. And if they're not vacationing there, all these powerful hotel chains, they're going to have a problem. And they are probably doing everything in their power to ensure that does not ever happen. Literally, after this case, the Intercontinental Hotel in Bali's bookings went down, like to the gutter. I don't know for how long, but like you can believe it wasn't good. And many Chinese tourists canceled their trip to Bali, even though they never even had plans to stay at this particular resort. They were like, I don't want to go, period. So people thought it was highly unlikely it was a robbery ring. It just didn't make sense. Like if an employee was consistently colluding with other robbers to take advantage of hotel guests, think about if you worked at that hotel. You saw your coworker do that. You'd be like, no, even though I don't want to be a snitch, I have to report this because my whole family lives here, not in this hotel, but in this town, and we're all going to be out of jobs if the tourism industry fails.
Yeah, it's just not.
Yeah.
It doesn't add up, yeah.
Like it impacts the entire area's GDP. And that's why I'm saying it's more unlikely that you're going to have stuff like to this scale, like a whole robbery ring in a place where tourism is the backbone of the economy.
And you said they didn't even take any valuables.
No.
So that's not the motive then.
Exactly. Because like, why would you go there? And even if everything goes to shit, it's like, would you really do it for nothing then?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this theory is not the strongest. It just doesn't make sense on so many fronts, including if this were true, the Bali authorities would have no incentive to protect the alleged thieves. They would be on the side of the hotel, who has power and influence in the area, and on the side of ensuring tourism is still intact after all of this. So they would most likely make an example out of the thieves to show the world, hey, don't worry, we are on the side of the safety and comfort of the tourists, so please keep visiting. Like, look at us, we're cracking down. Unless the thieves were there to steal something even more valuable than tourist ratings from China. Something bigger, something better. But what? Before the Bali police closed the investigation, so this is before their controversial press conference, an anonymous post popped up on a forum. It was from a local Indonesian who asked the public to just, quote, trust him. He said after a few days, everything would play out exactly what he said. And it would. So before the press conference even came out, he predicted what would happen at the press conference.
So it's like maybe someone from the police or...
It seemed like someone who had insider information.
Okay.
Or it was just taking really good educated guesses, but I highly doubt it, right? So he said all the other theories posted online right now were all smoke and mirrors to divert attentions away from the hotel so that they could blame Lee. The truth is, Lee was not just a wealthy crypto trader. Side note, in the world of cryptocurrency, even someone making like $1 million a year could be considered a small trader. Like when you're talking about sharks and whales in this game, you're talking like hundreds of millions of dollars. He said the reason that the couple traveled frequently to Southeast Asia is because cryptocurrency laws were known to be less strict than in China. And for someone to travel around to different countries to trade, I mean, that must mean that they were in the crypto world like on a deep level. They were big deals. Because,
call it whales.
Yeah, whales. Yeah. So according to the anonymous poster, Lee had a net worth that exceeded $500 million. They stated that he had $500 million in crypto holdings.
This is from the online post.
Yeah. To back this up, there were photos found on Lee's social media account that showed him having intimate dinners with other big whales in the crypto world. Not just some millionaires who got rich off of crypto and now make YouTube videos. I'm talking forerunners in the crypto world. Major people, major deals. Some of these people he rubbed shoulders with were not just rich and successful in crypto, but they held influence. They would be invited to attend conferences held by powerful politicians, government entities, Fortune 500 companies to talk about the future of crypto.
Do you know who?
I don't want to name them because they're not involved, and it seems like these posts are being taken down.
So, but you're talking about billionaires, like founders and...
Yeah, and reputable people that are not like shady, like, ooh, I wonder how they made their money. Like, they're very open about how they made their money in crypto. But I'm talking like people that will go and talk to political parties to talk about the future regulation in cryptocurrency.
Wow.
A comparison, if you will. So imagine, we just thought he was rich in crypto. So we just thought he's sitting front row at a Louis Vuitton fashion show. You're like, okay, if you're sitting front row at a Louis Vuitton fashion show, you must be well connected to Louis Vuitton. You've been invited and sitting there because you are wealthy and you have some influence. Louis Vuitton likes them. But then you find out that they're constantly at dinners with not only the CEO of Louis Vuitton, but the Arnolds, the head of LVMH. And you're like, whoa, okay, this person is deeper into this world than I thought. Like, this person is more connected. Like, maybe they're a bigger fish than I assumed that they had been. And they stated the reason that the couple were in Bali might have been two birds, one stone, to celebrate Gia's graduation, but also to handle a very big trade. The anonymous poster went on to say that the other party had zero intentions of conducting a fair trade, and his travel itinerary had been tracked since the day he landed in Bali. If he had hundreds of millions of dollars in crypto, that alone is 100 million reasons why someone might want him dead, or would even kill him to get their hands on his crypto. The original post continues, after the couple fell asleep that night, 5 people entered the hotel through the beach and climbed onto the second floor of the balcony. The on-shift staff of the hotel did not send these people, nor did they ask for them to come, but they knew ahead of time, the staff. And if they kept quiet, they stood to gain hundreds of thousands of dollars. 5 people entered the room. Lee and Gia were asleep, naked, and they first attacked Gia. And they were hoping to use her as a way to get Lee to talk. Okay, so this is where I have to get into some crypto basics real quick, and it's pretty pertinent to the case, and I had to ask him about all of this because I'm not really into crypto like that. So crypto experts, don't come for me. I'm just trying to make it simple, okay? So to put it simply, cryptocurrency is a digital virtual currency form that provides secure transactions that are independent of any central authority. So think like a government or a bank. It generally works through blockchain technology. And what that means is the blockchain technology records all transactions across the network, ensuring transparency, but also anonymity all at the same time. So when there's a trade, everyone can see a trade has been made, but there's no way to fake it. Like, you can't counterfeit a trade. But nobody knows who was involved in that trade. Like, no bank knows, no government knows, unless you yourself, the trader, wants to make it public information. But since everything is done virtually, there is a level of security measures that one needs to take. Just like how you keep your money in a bank, right? There is the risk that someone from anywhere in the world could somehow virtually get access to your bank account and transfer your funds out. Crypto has similar risks, and that is why there is the existence of cold wallets and hot wallets. Hot wallets refers to crypto that is stored in a place that is connected to the internet. Obviously, this is not the same, but just for the sake of simplicity, it's like putting your money in a bank. There's always a risk that someone can virtually gain access to your funds. And in the world of crypto, it's pretty bad compared to a bank. Like for a bank, you can always try and call them and say, hey guys, that's not me that's trying to do this transfer. Like, please put a stop on this. Or like, hey, can we put a limit to transfer of the funds? In crypto, it's particularly dangerous because once someone else has your hot wallet and the security measures to bypass all of like these things you put in place, they have complete control over your crypto, aka your money. Then you have the cold wallet. This is like putting your cash in a safe at home, under your mattress, if you will. This is a physical key of sorts, so think like a USB. This will hold crypto, and it's hard to hack because you need this physical key to access your crypto wallet. It's like cash. And once you have all the security measures that are set for this key, so sometimes there's like a recovery phase or like a PIN or like a safety code, right? Like the safe code, if you will, in the cash comparison. Then you have full access to a person's crypto. So again, crypto fanatics, don't freak out. I'm not a crypto expert. It's not my field of expertise. And this is just the way that I thought I would explain it, and that makes the best sense for this case. I would say that majority of people who hold crypto have it in hot wallets, so they have it on platforms connected to the internet. But most people that have significant amounts of funds in crypto, like I'm talking people with hundreds of thousands of or millions of dollars in crypto, I would say most of them have their funds in a cold wallet, meaning they have a physical key that ensures nobody can hack their crypto without their physical key. So with that, some people will put this key in like a safety deposit box at a bank. Some people keep it hidden away in their home in like a Pringles can in the pantry that no one will even suspect, or under their bed or in a safe. Or some people believe that on their body is the safest and they take this key with them wherever they go. The anonymous poster was stating that Lee went to Bali for a trade. He could not have been able to make that trade without bringing his ledger or like his cold key, like his key, right? And whoever was trading with him wanted his key and wanted his security measures to that key so that they could gain access to hundreds of millions of dollars that was allegedly in his crypto holdings. The potential killers in this scenario would have a lot to gain from this, and that could explain the torture marks on his body. So the theory is the traders were going to meet up with the couple potentially the day after, but the minute that they landed in Bali, they were being watched and tracked, and they were going to be ambushed before the trade was supposed to take place. In this theory, the couple didn't fight. Like the reason that they were staying with different multiple hotel reservations was a security precaution. Some speculated that they always did this when they traveled. So they would book 2 to 3 hotels per night, maybe some ahead of time, maybe the rest they would book once they land, but they already knew which ones they were going to check into. They would check into all the hotels, they would get the keys and pretend that they're staying in these hotels, maybe even leave some stuff behind in the rooms. So that way, even if someone is tracking them, or even if hotel employees are working with potential thieves that are going after his crypto, it would be hard to pinpoint which hotels they were in at which time. And people suspect that this was happening because Bali is not that big, and Southeast Asia is known as a crypto hub, or at least for the Asian cryptocurrency community. I don't know about the Westerners.
Wow, that would be crazy.
Another thing that could bolster this theory is that potentially Lee was there for multiple trades in varying degrees. So he was in Hotel A, and he said, hey babe, like, hey Gia, go to the Intercontinental and check in. I'm going to finish this trade in the hotel room in Hotel A with this person. They're going to meet me here. We're going to do a trade. And of course, whoever he just traded with would know that he was there in that hotel room in that hotel. That's not very safe. So immediately after that trade, he would leave for the Intercontinental, where Gia had already gotten a reservation late at night under her name, and he would stay at the Intercontinental.
Wow, but doing this in person just kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, some people believe that. So there's more theories too.
Yeah, this is something that you can totally do online. So,
Because
wow.
I was going to ask, like, what would be the incentive of doing it in person? Because let's say even if he weren't, I don't know how it works in China, but even if he weren't able to make these trades while he's physically in China, he could come to Southeast Asia. Why would he have to meet with people in person?
Like, what? I don't get it. Like, what kind of trade are they making? That's what I'm...
Yeah.
There's got to be more to the story than yeah, there's got to be more to it.
Some people were, I did see some speculations of this, but I don't know how much I can believe it because I think flying into China is pretty difficult. Like Chinese, like customs, I'm sure is really intense from what I hear. But the speculation was that maybe he was doing a trade and receiving cash. But I just imagine if he's doing a trade that big, how would you bring cash into mainland China without raising some alarms? I feel like the Chinese authorities are pretty strict.
Okay, I see what you're...
Like they're
okay.
getting like a virtual trade to get a physical product or something.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there could be more that he's doing that we don't know of.
Yeah. So this is just one of the theories. And so he had a trade that night. And even if these individuals that he traded with were to come back with sinister intentions, the room would be empty. He would not be there, and neither would his cold wallet. Some other speculations were that no trade was made that night, but the couple had been planning to bounce around from hotel to hotel. So during their stay, it was stated that they didn't want anyone to predict or track their movements. That's the theory, which could explain why they went to the Intercontinental so late at night. So if Gia had checked in early, around 2 p.m., which is like the typical check-in time for a hotel, the hotel staff, if they were in on something sinister, they would have all day to alert the others and start plotting, okay, which ways are the entry key points. But if they checked in late and Gia was alone, and it wasn't till around midnight that Lee came to join her, it would be hard to plan something for that night because there's only so much time before the sun comes up. And crimes inside popular destination resorts, they would have to be done in the cover of darkness. But the killers got to them regardless of the security measures that they allegedly put in place. So the theory paints a picture. Gia was attacked in an attempt to get Lee to talk, to give up his cold wallet and his security measures. Likely, they staged the bath entirely, is what the netizens believe, that they just filled the water and then threw her in there. And that could explain why there wasn't even alcohol in her toxicology reports, yet there was an open wine bottle. And then they grabbed Lee and tortured him until he gave up his key and security measures, which would explain all the shallow cuts and the potentials that his private parts were severed off. That seemed something like a killer would do to extract some sort of information from their victim, is the speculation. Like, you only do those things, allegedly, if these things were done, you only do those things if you have insane hatred for someone or you're trying to get something out of them. Another thing to support this claim is authorities reported nothing of value was taken from the hotel room. But why would the killers need a Rolex when they were after hundreds of millions of dollars in crypto? But this isn't a fail-proof theory either, because evidence authorities claim they found in the room do not support this claim. So there were no signs of forced entry in the room, and I'm not sure that includes the balcony door. I'm assuming it does, but they could have easily left that unlocked or open a crack to let in the breeze. You know, when you're at these types of resorts, you kind of let your guard down. Another thing authorities stated they searched for were fingerprints, DNA, and footprints from third parties, and they stated that they found nothing. The only two people with prints, DNA, and footprints in that room were the couple. However, netizens don't really believe anything the authorities have stated about this case. They feel as if the thieves knew enough to pull off something like this and had just gained access to hundreds of millions of dollars, it would have been easy to buy off the authorities. Which could explain why the authorities would withhold such key pieces of evidence like the fingerprints on the beer bottle and the balcony entrance. The anonymous poster stated that there were 5 people that were in on this, and in the end, despite giving them exactly what they wanted, they did not want Lee to make it out alive, so they stayed until he bled out. Thinking that he was dead, they left in the cover of darkness before the sun came up. Lee was not dead, like insinuating that he pretended to be dead. They left. He mustered up whatever energy and strength he had and crawled out of the room. Interesting detail, on May 1st, 2023 in Bali, the sun rose at 6:23 a.m. Lee was caught on security cameras at 6:32 a.m. crawling out of the room for help.
Oh, as soon as the sun came up.
He could only crawl and groan. He could not even scream at this point after enduring a whole night of torture. And the hotel staff on duty, it's alleged by netizens that the staff, not the chain, the staff were in on it because they stood to gain not just a fancy watch or a few $1,000s like the robbery theory, but they likely stood to gain thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, really, to gain from this. It's alleged that when they got a call from Mr. Bing, they delayed the time before getting up there to let Lee die. So they, quote, looked for a wheelchair. In the end, the anonymous poster stated the Bali police would no longer be providing any more helpful information and would state that no third parties were involved. The poster stated that the Bali PD will deem this case a no third party done by Lee type of case. This post was up before the Indonesian authorities held their press conference. So netizens believe that this is a pretty solid theory and that whoever this online poster was had some inside information. And of course, there is no way to determine that this is 100% true with the public information that we have right now. But the amount of money involved in this theory is more than enough to support a motive and a way to control the authorities.
I wish somebody knows his wallet address. Then you can track his money.
Yeah. And
so if there's movements after his death, then you can easily see, oh, wow, somebody is after it.
There is a more popular theory.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
But before we get to that, right? One argument was made that if he was tortured all night long and he was forced to watch his beloved girlfriend get murdered in front of his eyes, how did no one hear anything from that room? We don't know this to be true. This is purely speculation, just like everything else in this episode. But it is theorized that the hotel staff knew about this beforehand. When Gio was checking in, they knew who this was. Because there's, I'm sure, only a certain number of big crypto whales, right, that they would consider whales that frequented Bali. They knew who she was, and they gave her a room where there was no one on either side of her or up or below. It would have been too suspicious to make sure the whole floor was empty, and it might not have been possible because maybe, I'm sure every floor had some residents, so all they were looking was for an empty locked room, making it very difficult to hear the couple's screams for help that night. A few crazy things about this post other than the fact that it was posted before the Bali press conference. So whoever this Indonesian netizen was, they either had amazing prediction skills or got lucky with an educated guess or knew something about this case. Either way, within a few days, the post was taken down. So do with that what you will. And then we have the next theory, the most popular theory, the money laundering theory. A lot of netizens agree with this theory, potentially even more than the crypto theory, but it's kind of hard to gauge because at least on the Mandarin side, it seems like more people agree with this. I don't know about the Indonesian netizens, so please let me know. I'm curious to know your thoughts too on the theories. So this theory suggests that Lee was not actually rich from crypto, but from money laundering. He stated he was rich from crypto because he was pretty flashy on social media, and the easiest way to explain how you made so much money at such a young age that people can't really question is crypto. Like with the rise of crypto billionaires and millionaires and the frequency of seeing these wealthy people attribute their monetary success to cryptocurrency, people are less likely to raise an eyebrow at a young rich kid if they got rich from crypto versus being like, oh, I founded a company. If you founded a company, people could try and figure out what industry and what other companies are doing in that industry and how much revenue you have. It's also easier for authorities or different government entities to try and accurately access your funds or like figure out what you're doing. Whereas crypto, it's kind of like no one really knows what's going on in crypto. So it's like most people would be like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. Like lots of rich people in crypto. So he was just using it as a way to say, hey, look, don't be suspicious about my wealth. I'm not doing any illegal activities. I'm just rich from crypto. The theory came about when netizens started digging into Lee's background and his friends, and all of their lifestyles were exposed online, and from their social media presence, we can gather that they're all young, they're all rich, and they're all showing off their wealth. Now, of course, none of this directly proves that Lee nor his friends were engaged in illegal activities, but netizens speculated that Lee was rich in crypto, and he did have a lot of crypto, but that's not how he got rich. They said that he got rich from money laundering. That's the accusation. So some quote evidence to back up their theory is that although there are self-made crypto millionaires, netizens stated a good chunk of people who made big profits in the crypto space, they were already rich. So, I mean, they had the funds to invest in a ton of different crypto and their money was making them money. It's more likely someone will make a ton of money in the stock market if they have a ton of money already versus someone who has very little funds to invest. And Lee, coming from a lower middle class background with no substantial career before crypto, people doubted he could make $500 million off of crypto alone. And that's just his estimated net worth, but you get it. An alleged insider close to the couple stated, and again, take this with a grain of salt, there is no verification on this source of if they even knew this couple personally. This could be someone trying to get attention or like stir up some drama. But they stated that Lee was a money launderer, a professional money washer, and he worked for the infamous the JY Group. The JY Group is Asia's largest gambling group. Some people would call them one of the biggest organized crime groups in Asia, but I would not call them that because I have a ton of Asia trips coming up and I would like to have some peace of mind. But some people might say that. I'm also not saying this. Netizens are saying this. But they're saying that they are one of Asia's largest money laundering groups. According to an insider, Lee was washing money for them. And to give you quick background, to like put it simply, money laundering can involve 3 big steps. So the first step involves the placement of illegally obtained money, meaning introducing that illegally obtained cash into the financial system. So that could be putting it into a bank or into crypto, introducing it somehow into the system. And the next phase is layering the money. So this is when you start mixing the illegal money with legally obtained money to disguise the real source of the illegal money. So imagine you have a deck of cards and this deck is all legally obtained money. Everyone like from their jobs, these are like people have bought stuff from you, like legal. Then you introduce illegal funds into this deck of cards and you just start shuffling to the point where no one can really pinpoint which cards were illegal and which ones weren't. I mean, statistically, you could say maybe a certain percentage of them were illegally obtained money, but you don't know which ones. And you just keep mixing. Then the next phase is called integration. This is when you reintroduce the illegal funds straight into the economy. You start dealing out this deck of cards. Now, money laundering is crazy illegal, like everywhere, not just in the US, but everywhere, in Indonesia and China, everywhere. Money laundering is, at this large scale, is very high stakes, high punishment crime. Most governments clearly let a lot of things go, but they are not, if they're not getting a cut from your earnings, that is like an unforgivable crime in most government entities. Apparently, Lee's role to act as a middleman, a money washer to the JY Group, his task was laundering the money for the group via crypto. But according to someone who claims they knew the couple, allegedly, he slowly skimmed a bit off the top of the money that he was ordered to launder. And when I say some, they stated it was around $14 million worth that he basically stole from the JY Group. And these types of groups, they like to make an example out of whoever wrongs them. According to an insider, they ordered a kill on Lee, and whoever finished the deed would stand to gain a few $100,000. And it would be important to make the crime scene as gruesome as possible because the news had to travel far and wide and instill fear in any other washers that they had. As a sign of, this is what happens to you and your loved ones if you cross us, so don't even think about it. The insider reportedly told netizens during an interview, the rumors on crypto trading, like the reason that he died, those are fake. Crypto trading is not going to make you that amount of money. It's all a cover-up. In reality, he's money laundering for gambling and wire fraud groups. He is actually the middleman for the JY Group for money laundering, but this time he ate up about $14 million and is being chased by the organization. Everyone in Southeast Asia knows that the JY Group is the biggest player in this game, and they would have control over authorities as well. In the interview, they were asked, well, this anonymous poster was asked. Yeah, they were interviewed by like a netizen. It was the whole thing.
What do you mean interview? Like a video interview?
No, like an anonymous, yeah.
Online,
yeah.
Back and forth, okay.
So they were asked, like, how do you know so much? And they responded, JY Group also sent out the kill long ago, and the reward was $150K. But because nothing happened, no one knew whether or not they actually sent out this kill. But now everyone in the group, like everyone in the industry that knows about JY and knows about how they run things, they know that he had done wrong. Like he had wronged them. He'd crossed them. So a few things. Netizens believe this makes sense, and it could explain the precaution that he took of switching hotels. So you remember how we said the precaution was maybe he didn't want people to know where he was because he didn't want anyone to target him for his cold wallet. But maybe he was doing this because he didn't want anyone that worked for JY to know exactly which hotel that he was staying at. And maybe the couple didn't have a fight. But some netizens would point out, why would he be visiting Southeast Asia then if that's where the group held the most power? So it's a Southeast Asian group. I don't want to say the country because I'm trying to go to that country. But it's a group from a Southeast Asian country. Yes. So it just didn't make sense that he would go to Southeast Asia where they had a strong hold over a lot of these Southeast Asian countries. He would be safer staying in China, or if he really was going to make a run for it, because if you're stealing money from a group like that, you're making a run for it. You're not just going to continue working with them or hanging out in the same sphere of people. You're going to make a run for it. Wouldn't it be best to somehow make it potentially to the US or Canada? And I know immigration is really hard into Western countries from China, but when you have that amount of money, it could open doors. So these are places where this group might have much less reach. I'm not saying that they don't have reach in these places, but probably much less than in Southeast Asia where they really hold the reins. But something that does kind of support this theory is if you look at the timeline of Lee's wealth, it doesn't add up. So he started flaunting his wealth online around 2017, 2018. But he also would later share screenshots of his crypto accounts, not like his account information. I don't know if that makes sense. But he would show how it had grown and how many funds were there at certain points.
How much money is in there?
Yeah, not all of it, but some of his accounts, He would just show snapshots as motivational posts, really.
When?
This was way before he was murdered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he didn't have much money in whatever he was showing at 2017, 2018 era. So people are like, wait, but you were showing all these Rolls Royces back in 2017. And if your crypto accounts later that you were posting about didn't have that much money in 2017, how were you affording that lifestyle back in 2017? So either you had a different account that had a lot more holdings in 2017.
You're saying he's flaunting an account that doesn't have a lot of money?
It did at the time that he was flaunting it. So think about it, in 2022, he posted something in his growth,
Oh,
and
you're saying, okay, so here's the account. I see. Here's the account in 2022 that has, let's say, 100 million in there.
Yes.
And
like that.
if you look at the graph, it's showing in 2017, he only had $100,000, for example.
Yes.
So that means in 2017, he didn't have a lot of money. He just made the money in 2022.
But when you go back to his 2017 social media post, he was flaunting a very large lifestyle. So people are like, that doesn't make sense because your money in 2017, at least from the account that you showed us, does not have money in 2017. So how are you buying all these Rolls Royces and living in these mansions and doing all these things?
Okay.
So I think that's why people were like, okay, maybe he didn't make his money from crypto. And that's not saying that he doesn't have money in crypto, but maybe he didn't make it there really in the beginning. Insiders even speculated that 2 of his Rolls Royces he frequently posted in were not actually his, but they were from the JY group. And they let their washers drive Rolls Royces. Yeah. Look, I'm not sure if you believe any of these theories or more than the other, but one piece of evidence that can be used to support either the crypto theory or the money laundering theory was that Lee texted his mom a few days before his death, 2 days before his death, and he sent his mom a text that said, "Mom, don't listen to what other people say. They're trying to hurt me." So at first I was like, okay, maybe they're spreading rumors about this guy, right? This text alone, though, made netizens question, okay, did the authorities even see this? Did they even care about this? How can they say no third parties were involved when he literally explicitly stated 2 days before his death, they're trying to hurt me? When asked about this text message, Lee's mom said it was strange. Earlier that day, she got a call from an anonymous person that kept telling her that her son Lee was doing drugs and was having thoughts of ending things. She freaked out because she was like, who is this? Why are you telling me about my son? Where is my son? She reached out to him and he texted her saying, "Mom, don't listen to what they're saying. They're trying to hurt me."
What?
She also reported receiving threatening calls after her son's death. She later said in interviews, "I'm so afraid. I don't know if someone is a reporter and reaching out or if they're reaching out pretending to be a reporter and have plans to get to me too." Because of this news, Lee's mom never even flew out to Bali to help extradite her son's body. Gia's parents immediately flew to Bali to settle the case. Lee's parents never showed up. He is not really in touch with his dad, from what I believe, but Lee's mom didn't show up. And she said, Gia's mom called me from Indonesia asking why I'm not there. And it's not because I don't love my son, but I was worried for my own safety, and I have another son, like his half-brother, Lee's half-brother, and I can't leave him alone in this world if something were to happen to me. Insinuating that such suspicious things happened before and after his death that she believed that someone had murdered her own son, and potentially she could be in danger too if she had gone to Bali. She also stated that Lee texted Gia prior to his death. Now, we don't know how much prior. I don't think it was while he was in Bali, but we do know that he texted her, Gia, I hope that one day you'll be able to see the truth about this world. Take care of our 3 cats and my mom. I did my best, but they are too cruel. Both of these texts to a lot of netizens feel like someone is after him and he knows it. Lee's mom emphasized, I don't believe Lee would do something so irrational. He loves Gia. Why would he kill her? In an interview, she stated that she knew very little about her son's job. However, she knew that he was making a ton of money because he began buying luxury cars and new houses and gave her a big allowance. And whenever she would ask, he would reportedly just tell her that he was in the finance industry. She stated if Lee was in fact guilty of money laundering or any other illegal activity, he should have been punished by the law instead of dying on foreign soil. A lot of Chinese netizens were honestly kind of unhappy with his mom. In their eyes, they stated that she was a coward who cared more about herself and her younger son than Lee. They said, he's your son, you should have gone even if there was a risk. Lee's mom must address this injustice for your son. Like, what is your life? Your younger son still has his father. It's so sad for Lee. If he went down the wrong path, it's because of his family. I personally don't think it's our place to cast judgment on a victim's family members, especially when there's no indication that they were involved in any sort of crimes. So I can see why she made that choice, but I'm also not a parent. So I'm not sure if the choice just doesn't sit right with a lot of parents or what. Perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. She did say, I bought 2 graves. When I die, I want to be buried with my son. To this day, she does not accept the theory that her son killed his beloved girlfriend and then ended his own life with a beer bottle. And most netizens don't believe it either. The case has caused quite a bit of tension for the international relations between the 2 countries, between China and Indonesia. A lot of Chinese netizens who are scheduled to fly out to Bali for their holidays, many of them have started mass canceling their trips. Indonesian authorities refuse to acknowledge any of these theories, even as netizens, not just from China, but many netizens from Indonesia are actually putting pressure on their own government, because you have to remember, again, when a government fails at doing something, the people that are ultimately going to be impacted the worst are the people that live in that country. So yes, you can say it's really devastating for a lot of Chinese nationals or even foreigners who want to go visit Bali because it's like, oh my gosh, now I'm scared. But really, the people that are going to be impacted the most by things like this are Indonesians. And so Indonesians are like, hey, we need to get to the bottom of this so our economy is not disrupted. And a lot of them are just saying, no, I don't want to live in a country where I feel like there's injustice, even if it's for tourists, even if it's not for Indonesians. So a lot of Indonesians have been stepping up and trying to get answers for Chinese netizens and for the families of the victims. But as of right now, as of the publication date of this episode, this is the only information that has been really shared with the public. And because the Bali police said that this case was closed, technically, I don't think we're going to get much new information unless China really starts pressing. And I don't know if that's something they should do, shouldn't do. I don't know how that's going to impact international relations. I don't know how that's going to impact anything, really. But this has been causing fear amongst a lot of people. And I would say it's been causing more fear in the crypto community than it has been causing in travelers, in international travelers. So I think the reason is most netizens can agree that this crime seems to have been targeted towards the couple and not just a random tourist attack. So it's not just like, oh, a random rich tourist, let's go attack them in the most gruesome way in Bali. It seems no matter what destination this couple could have gone, they could have been targeted just because of the space that they were in. So I saw a lot of crypto people in these forums saying like, we have to be careful. And people are choosing to be much more private with their crypto holdings and how they're making their money, and much more discreet about their money. So it seems like it's not a case of wealthy individuals or wealthy travelers being attacked and brutalized, but rather people in this industry. Whether it's crypto or whether it's money laundering or something else.
Wow.
But what are your thoughts? Do you think the couple were killed? This is the information we were able to gather and pull from sources in Mandarin, but if you're Indonesian and you know more about this case from a different perspective, please let us know in the comments. But from the information we were able to get so far, like just from what I've said in this video, but I think that this case is very, very strange. And I think it is an injustice to close the investigation just 2 weeks after the deaths, especially when there's just so many lingering questions. What are your thoughts? Please stay safe out there, and I will see you guys on Sunday for the mini-sode. Bye.